Well, hello, Sonia. How are you?
I'm doing great this morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to be here with you. And folks, we are really blessed and pleased and happy and excited and all the things to be here today with Dr. Sonia Singla from the Marigold Center. And I really am very interested in this topic. I think, my wife is going through menopause. I've had other women on this show talking about menopause. I think what you are doing at the Marigold Center is such a unique approach, and I can't wait to get into all of that with you. So thank you once again, Sonia, for taking the time to be here. I know you're a very busy person.
Get started and educate all the women out there on this very unique chapter of their life.
Yeah, thank you. And it is unique, right? And it is a chapter that we really need to lean into and talk about. So but I wanna lean in and talk about you first, a little bit. So, you've got this really interesting background. It's, kind of this amazing combination of both the work that you've trained in Eastern medicine, Western medicine. You've had this sort of scientific path to medicine, this very personal path to medicine as well. Sonia, can you talk a little bit about, your own journey? And I kinda guess how that shaped where you are and getting you started on the important work you're doing now.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, my journey is very personal in terms of my menopause journey specifically. I was 39 when I went through menopause, which is about a decade before the average age. The average
Sure.
age is about 51. And so I had small children. I was bewildered. There was a cascade of debilitating symptoms that came with it that I sort of had no idea where they came from. Sort of, they came all of a sudden. I was not expecting it.
Mm,
I saw a lot of well-meaning doctors for my chronic bronchitis, my frozen shoulder,
mm,
my glaucoma. There were things that were sort of unexplainable. And, at the time, no one really knew. And so they would say, well, I guess you have to have shoulder surgery. I guess you have, adult onset asthma. And I was like, but that's the one thing I've never had an allergy. I've never been an asthma kid. This doesn't sort of add up. And then when I would push back and say, the temporal relationship is such that as soon as I went into menopause, all of these symptoms started to occur. I was met with sort of like a shrug and,
mm.
quizzical look, like sort of that doesn't make any sense. And so I sort of had to do a deep dive myself. I did sort of what women have to do when they're sort of dismissed. I wrote myself my own prescription as a physician. I can do that for hormone replacement therapy, and I felt better. I did feel like my symptoms started to abate. But I wasn't feeling like myself. And I had a business I was running. I had three small children. I had a husband. I was, sort of shrouded in shame being so young. I wanted to be a vibrant woman, and so I sort of hid that part,
Right.
and I was doing a lot of self discovery.
Mm,
I remembered being a young child and feeling nourished. And I thought it was because I was a young child and I was lucky enough to be well cared for. But then when I started to think more about the foods that I ate, about the sort of the things that I would engage with my grandmother, I realized that part of this was this piece that was missing in Western medicine. And for me, that was Ayurveda, which is an Indian, Eastern medicine, 3,000 years old. Ayurveda means the science of life.
mm,
And it's not only a body of science, but it's also a way of living.
mm,
I think that I was not living well at that time because of my symptoms and because of burnout and all of the responsibilities that I had. And so when I sort of learned about it. I started developing, better habits, doing the things that sort of served my specific body, my specific constitution. And I got better.
Mm,
And then as I sort of worked in the hospital, I would see, medication just sort of being given for symptoms and not really looking at the whole person. I think in a lot of ways, women are so complicated in terms of their biology, right? There's so much that goes on. And I don't think that we were putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
mhm.
And so this was always a dream of mine to start the Marigold Center. And 10 years ago, I just couldn't do it. And so this is part of what I want to talk about. The midlife change is that there's expansion and there's freedom
Mm.
if you can get your health in order.
Yeah. And I think what's so profound in what you just said too, Sonia, is, at 39, it's unbelievable that you were kind of dealing with this misrepresentation of your diagnosis, of your symptoms. And it's like you said, sort of this notion of like, as women, you're not listened to, even though you yourself were a physician. So it's not, it's like not like you didn't know what you were talking about. You have said, and I love this quote from you, that menopause is not a medical footnote. It's a profound shift. And but yet this phase in people's lives has been neglected, misrepresented by mainstream healthcare. I know that's a big part of what you're doing with the Marigold Center, but Sonia, is it still, it's still happening though, isn't it?
Still happening. I mean, the wonderful thing is that it's in the zeitgeist, right? Like now people are actually saying the words menopause, they're saying perimenopause, they're talking about the symptoms. We've been talking about Viagra for a very long time. And if you think about Viagra, it is for erectile dysfunction, right? My sister-in-law is also a physician in Ohio,
Mhm.
and she has a center similar to mine. She was promoting something that helped with vaginal rejuvenation, and part of what she wanted to say, she does a lot of you know commercials, and what she wanted to say on TV was that it helps, this could help with orgasm.
Mhm.
The TV stations would not allow her to say that, with because for women, for a women's healthcare need, they would not allow her to say that. And so I think we are just sort of seeing the narrative change, that women, no one wants to talk about women getting older. That's just not something. We lose our power, we lose our beauty. These are all the things that
Mhm.
in the past were sort of said about us. Whereas men, when they have white hair, they have knowledge, they have power, they sort of step
Yeah.
into the workplace, and they sort of go up, whereas women have to step out because of caretaking needs. So
Yep.
I think that we've changed the narrative quite a bit in the last decade.
Mm.
Again, now, like I mentioned before, doctors didn't even understand that the menopause symptoms that I were having were related to the loss of estrogen in my body. Now we know that. Now we have done that sort of work to bring it to the forefront, but we're so behind. So we're catching up.
What still astounds me, Sonia, is half of the population in this world is going to go through menopause, right?
Right.
It is just a fact. But really, I think what you just said really resonated with me around, since I am a man with white hair, what you just said resonates around, still for women, aging is not seen as something that you're supposed to do. And it's just so crazy to think that society is still sometimes caught up in that cycle. But I do appreciate what you said, and hope that we are starting to break the stigma and break the barriers associated with that, due to work that folks like you are doing. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at medical schools, right, 50%, actually over 50% of school students are women.
Mm.
So, we're producing a lot of female doctors, and I think we are working on changing the narrative. We're working hard because we see it every day in the
Right.
work that we've done, and in our patients.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. The other thing I appreciate, as a public health person, is a lot of the innovation that you were doing, Sonia, around sort of clinical care and holistic care. And you talked a little bit at the beginning about this holistic approach and this whole bodied approach. Can you talk a little bit about what you are doing at the Marigold Center, sort of the range of services, offerings that you have? I know HRT, but there's also so many other things that you're doing, sound baths, just, and if there is a typical sort of journey for a patient at the Marigold Center, what that looks like.
Well, we know women are really busy, right? So what we're really good at is multitasking.
Right.
And so we don't have a lot of extra time. We're running errands. We're trying to get to our appointments. We're trying to pick up our kids from school.
You're in the sandwich generation, right?
You're in
Yeah.
the sandwich generation, all those things, they're all true, and they're cumbersome, and they take a toll, and so what I wanted to create for women was sort of an umbrella, a one-stop shop, if you will, right? And so a typical intake visit, I try not to scare people because I say, "I would like you to allot 2 hours for that first visit." You're gonna walk through the door, you're gonna be greeted with tea. The tea is cumin, cardamom, coriander, turmeric and fennel, right?
Mm.
Just a great digestive. It's going to calm your nerves. There's no caffeine in it. It's warm, and that's kind of what our body needs at this age. We need warm, moist
Yeah.
foods and warm drinks, right?
Right.
So we start that way. You come in, you have an hour and a half of my time where we go through your whole medical history. We talk not just about your symptoms, but sort of we try to connect the dots. And I talk about what is going to happen in menopause if you're in perimenopause, why some of the things are happening. So many patients will say, I have good nutrition, I exercise, I do all the things,
Right.
and still my cholesterol is going up. My hemoglobin A1C, which is a predictor of diabetes, is creeping up. My labs are not looking the way they did 5 years ago, right? So there's definitely a medical piece, and the biological shift that happens once we lose our hormone is something that, takes time to talk about.
Sure.
So, and then I offer, like you said, the HRT. We talk about microdosing GLP-1s. There's a lot of medical things that we talk about.
Mm.
But then we spend some time talking about just sort of self-care and what that looks like. Again, I think part of the problem is, Instagram is wonderful and there's so much out there, but it becomes overwhelming, right? You have
Woke
to
up like
do
poet.
1,000 things to make sure that you are optimized, and women do not have time for one more thing, right? So I try to provide sort of easy hacks.
Mm.
When we talk about meditation, women will say, I don't have time for that. I don't have an hour to, lay on the ground, and I can't quiet my mind." I do something, I light a candle for them, and I said, "We're going to take deep breaths. You're just going to look into that candle flame, and you're going to breathe. And we're going to do that for 4 minutes."
Mhm.
And we do that together. I sort of teach them to inhale and exhale and what that looks like. And I said, "Here, take this candle. Here's a sheet on how to do the breathing. You have 4 minutes every day,
Everybody
any
can.
time of day."
Yeah.
And any time of day. You don't have to do it in the morning. You don't have to do it at night. You can do it before you pick up the kids from school, whenever you have that 4 minutes. Just light that candle. You don't have to beat yourself up if you have looping thoughts. Just look into that candle flame, and that will just help reset
Mm.
and sort of detoxify everything that's in your mind. And then they go on to have a full Ayurvedic body treatment. And that is also sort of the start of the process of what does it mean to sort of
Mm.
take care of yourself? What does it mean to treat your whole body?
Mm.
Um, and so that treatment, sort of leads into the whole discussion of Ayurveda and how we can sort of best align the patient in terms of their needs and what it all looks like, and sort of put it all together for them. Their treatment ends with a personalized sound bath. We know that vibration sort of calms our nervous system, resets our parasympathetic, and that is something that we all need to tap into, because it's really the inflammation that drives the insulin resistance, the high cholesterol that occurs post menopause. And so decreasing your cortisol levels, in any way that we can do that is beneficial. So I'm just trying to introduce lots of different modalities to do that.
I'm fascinated by all of this, right? As someone as a yoga practitioner myself, someone who tries to do breath work, it's so challenging. And I really appreciate, Sonia, that you are taking the time to really think about this personalization approach to what you are doing with your patients. I mean, it's almost unheard of to hear a physician say that she does a 90-minute intake with her patients. I mean, it's so remarkable, especially in the sort of current situation that we find ourselves in as it pertains to even primary care, where physicians are strapped for time with their patients and don't have those opportunities to have those connections with them, right? And you've really made that a cornerstone of what you're doing at Marigold, but that comes at a little bit of a cost too, right? I mean, this is a business decision that you also made here, Sonia. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, these are the things that, sort of keep you up at night. But I really tried to take the hedgehog approach, which is, the Good to Great book, right? Where you try to find something that you're passionate about, something that you think that you're good at, and something that is economically sustainable.
Mm,
I, being, in the hospital healthcare setting for so many years, you know, doctors are doing the best they can in a
right.
broken system, right? So to have to see 20 patients in a morning and 20 patients in the afternoon, they can't give patients more than 15 minutes of their time. And so when my women come in and say, gosh, well, I wasn't able to ask these questions. And do you have time for those questions? And I'm like, yes, we have an hour and a half to go over all your questions. That's a lot of time, right? Unfortunately, again, you're right. It comes at a cost, and sometimes you can't sort of work that out. I what I try to tell my patients is that this is this is the definition of personalized medicine, right? If you look at giving a medication, there's two things you want to look at: measurable outcome and time.
Mhm.
So if you have a raging infection, you're not going to sprinkle a little bit of antibiotics because you don't have the time. You have to sort of quell that infection as soon as possible. But with what I'm doing at Marigold Center with, midlife women is, I call it the power decade.
Mm,
We have some time to sort of build our skills, to get stronger, to optimize, to get healthier. So in this way, we are doing this personalized medicine in the way that we want to do it, with the measurable outcome of, better health and time. So I'm sort of using that model and trying to impress upon women that this is something that you are asking for. You're asking for personalized care,
right.
and so this is how it's going to work. In addition, you're going to do the yoga classes that I have in house. You're going to do the sound baths. You're going to do the strength training. You're going to do the nutrition. You're going to increase your protein, and these are all things that we're going to check in on monthly.
Right. And the adherence is there, I'm assuming, right? So folks are also leaning into this as well when they because you're asking a lot of your patients, I think.
Right.
But I think it seems like they're willing to give a lot because they're so either excited or anticipating those benefits that will come along with this.
It has to be a good match, right? So after that first intake visit, I give them the time and the space to sort of decide, is this something that they can do right now? Is this something that they want to invest in
Mm,
themselves, right? And I can impress upon them, hey, the tsunami is coming. Let's get ready for it, right? But they have to really want to do it. And most times they do, because
sure.
people want to help themselves. They understand that their health is important at this age. They've seen what happens when you neglect, the little symptoms. They start to brew and they get bigger. So I have been thrilled with sort of the commitment that I'm seeing from women around this issue.
You mentioned that the brokenness of the system, Sonia, right? And I really appreciate what you're trying to do around kind of putting women at the center of their own health journey, and the work that you're doing at Marigold Center. And maybe it's just enough to kind of spark flame that will light a revolution here around making this more of a norm, right? But do you see hope there, Sonia, I guess, around kind of helping to change the healthcare system at a systemic level to make more of what you're doing, particularly around women's health, more of the norm?
I do. I think there's a lot of great, um, ways that people are moving towards self-care,
Mhm.
seeking the right care, right? A lot of what we say to women, if you'll hear it on Instagram from sort of the menopause influencers, if you don't have the right provider, find a new one,
Right.
right? this is not something, it's not one size fits all. It's something that you have to advocate for. We're giving women the tools to
Mhm,
advocate for themselves when they go into the doctor's office. I
mhm,
think that's changed, and probably the power of the internet has helped change that, because you can look up information. You can go in and say, I'm having these symptoms. I think they might be related to this. What do you think, doctor? Right. Um, but I think that there's has to be change at the government level. I think that is happening. We have a lot of people that are advocating for this. It's going to take time. And until that happens, we have to be creative and find ways to get the help that we need. And I do believe that women are starting to feel like they can do that.
mm. I appreciate the creative problem-solving approach
Yeah,
that you're really taking here, and sort of the intentional choices that you have made, both around your practice, your clinical space, the integration of both the Eastern and the Western aspects of what you are doing. I'd love to talk to you a little bit now about Sonia the entrepreneur. We have Sonia the physician, Sonia the entrepreneur. Like so many women, you're wearing a million different hats, the parent, the daughter, all those things that you're doing. You're a founder of your own organization. You are also a physician. You are also an advocate, clearly. Can we talk a little bit about the very personal decision to be an entrepreneur, to build something like the Marigold Center? You could have kept doing what you were doing or done something else with your time. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about how you've kind of seen your own growth through this process, Sonia.
absolutely. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I've had this dream for 10 years.
Mhm.
That's a long time, right? Um, Probably even more than that. I looked at spaces maybe even 8 years ago that I thought, "Okay, I can do this." I talked to physical therapists and OBGYNs. I was gonna bring the whole thing together, and, it just wasn't the right time. I didn't have it in me, for lots of reasons, right? The young kids, the aging parents, all of the things that I needed to take care of, but also, sort of the faith in myself. I
Yeah.
think I was sort of encumbered by, well, what if this doesn't work out? What will people say? How will I manage this?
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the thing that I try to impress upon women is the beauty of this age where you can let go of some of those things and you can really tap into your intuition. It's another reason why, this holistic approach is very important to me, because I think for so long women sort of have forgotten that their intuition, their their learned experience is so valuable.
Mm.
And I was surprised, it was a leap of faith. I am surprised that how much this has resonated when I talk about what happened to me and how much I don't want this to happen to other women. It's been sort of like, I feel like it's been grace.
Yeah.
And to be able to share, I talk to all of my patients before they come in to sort of, it's a discovery call. And that conversation, we always hang up and the patient feels hopeful. And it's because I have shared my personal story. And I think for women, they need to understand that we all have personal stories. We all have something to share, which is also why the community aspect of this is so
So important.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. Has that surprised you, how much the community has started to develop around? I mean, I know it was always your hope, I'm sure, but has that surprised you at all?
It has, and again, but drawing from my own personal experience, I, loved the routine of when my kids were younger and they were in school, those touch points that you had with parents, with them other moms. It felt like there was a village. You need moms to pick up your kids from soccer practice. And so once my kids graduated from high school, I didn't realize how much I was going to miss that and how much of that was lost.
Yeah.
And then COVID also sort of made it so people don't gather as much. And I wanted to make sure that women understood the only way that we are going to, get through this and thrive is if we share our stories, if we talk together. That's one of the things that women have said they've been most surprised about, is that there's an openness to talk about things like beauty, like aging, like sexual health,
Mhm.
that, in a space where they feel like we're all together in this.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
don't think that those conversations happen as much as they should.
Yeah, and a space where they feel all connected and safe, most importantly, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, and by the way, I skipped over something that I didn't want to skip over, and you said space, and it reminded me. I've been on your website, I've been on your Instagram. You have the most beautiful space, and I'm sure there was a lot of intentionality around the aesthetic and sort of the emotional environment that you've created at your center. Where did that inspiration come from, Sonia?
I have always been interested in design and
Mm,
beauty, and medicine is very clinical, right? It's sort of the
totally.
opposite of that.
Yeah.
Hospitals are not usually beautiful.
Right.
Doctors, buildings, offices are not usually beautiful. We had a new office building, medical office building, come up in my local area, and I was so excited because I thought, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be brand new, cutting edge. And while it was cutting edge, it was still missing that softness, the beauty piece of it, that when you walked in, you're like, okay, I can take a deep breath. White coat syndrome is real.
Sure.
People fear going to the doctor. They're worried that they don't know what they're going to find out. And so I wanted to make this a place of, we're going to come in, you're going to be okay. You're going to feel good when you leave, and you're going to feel good as soon as you walk in the door. And so I believe that women deserve beauty and as they age, right? We're done with that phase of life where we're in doctor's offices with crying babies and pregnant women. That was a wonderful stage. We
Oh, we're
we
over it.
all we're over it. We've done it. And so I want women to come in and just look around. I have French antiques, I've got modern furniture. I just want it to be like they're sitting in their living room, and feeling like they can have their cup of tea and just chat with a friend.
Love that. I love that so much. Sonia, I'm gonna ask you sort of the dreaded question around, if you knew then what you know now, and the dreaded advice question. But look, women entrepreneurs, you face a struggle. It's an uphill battle, right? Not everything from the burden of proof associated that is much more confounding for women entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs. And now you're building something that's mission driven, very meaningful, and on top of that, Son, you're doing it in an under-addressed space. So you're really stacking the odds up against yourself, which is so impressive. But for any other young woman or middle-aged woman, it doesn't matter. Age is not really a factor here. But they're trying to also do something like you're doing. What advice do you give to those folks, or what pieces of I wish I knew then what I know now would you want to impose upon someone in that situation?
I love mentoring young women. That's sort of been something that I've done throughout my life with internships and various other things. I always tell my young women, stay in it. It's so hard to stay in it when life gets busy, when you have kids. But if there's some way that you can keep doing part of what you love, part time, half time, whatever it is,
Mhm.
because then once you are in it, you're still keeping touch with all of those people. You sort of still have a seat at the table,
Right,
and then you grow from there. When you're ready, it will happen. I
right.
think, right when what is the quote? As you walk the way appears, right?
Wait here.
And so
Right. Yep.
I think that women need to understand that you can't have it all at once, right? You can do all the things now. Now I feel like, okay, I have done all the things I wanted to do. This was the one thing that I really wanted to do in my life.
Right.
And so I think you reach out to mentors. I think you reach out to colleagues. I have found so many circles of women that have really buoyed me up, who have said, oh, I'm going to help you get on this podcast. Oh, I'm going to reach out to this person. I'm going to set up this thing. I'm going to bring 10 friends and have you talk at the Marigold Center because I want them to see it. And then we're going to do a sound bath because they've never experienced sound bath before. It's extraordinary. Women want to help each other, and so you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I would say that's the biggest thing. Just be fearless. Just be fearless.
I love that. Just be fearless and just put yourself out there, right? And like you said, the way will appear once you start to walk the way. And I think that's so important. You have to tell me about your own personal growth, Sonia. As now, since you've launched the Marigold Center, how do you feel you have grown and changed personally?
I am surprised that it's this idea of women's wisdom, right?
Mm,
That I am really tapping into my whole life.
mm,
I'm a daughter of immigrants.
right.
My parents are in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a Midwest girl whose biggest dream was to come to Los Angeles, right? My dad is a 6'2" man with a turban, but a super proud American who worked at Ford Motor Company for 40 plus years,
I
right?
love it.
So I have a lot of layers to me.
Yes, you
Um,
do.
and my dad would always say, take the best and leave the rest.
Mhm,
And I feel like I have tapped into that I am trying to take the best of what I've learned, the best experiences that I can draw from, and really apply them to Marigold Center and my
mm,
patients. And that has been just the joy of a lifetime. I mean, I wake up so grateful that I have this opportunity for however long I have it. I'm thinking about the future and thinking about all the things I can do. But right
sure.
now, I love my patients, and I am grateful that my experiences have led me to this, because a lot of times you don't know. You're like, oh, okay, that thing that happened to me, I don't know what it was for. I don't know what it means. I don't know how it's going to come back in my life again.
Mm.
And I can say now that everything that I've done, every experience that I've had, has sort of made me grow into this person that I am at the Marigold Center.
I would say it has brought you to this place today where you find yourself, which is so,
Right.
so remarkable. Sonia, we were talking about our kids earlier and you're got, responsibilities associated with their kids, and we both do, even though they're older now, they're never not our kids, right? Responsibilities with our parents, our spouses. You're blending so much, Sonia, and at the same time, you're also, really advocating for people to take their own self-care and figure those things out as well. How do you blend your own sort of self-care, the work that you need to do as an entrepreneur, which is, some would say, 24/7, and your, let's call them, responsibilities to your family, to your children?
Well, I would say 10 years ago, I was not very good at it.
Mhm,
I was always putting everyone first. I was not taking care of myself in the way I should.
mhm.
And I was burnt out.
Yeah,
I think that what comes with this midlife is clarity, the ability to let go of some control. There were things that I thought, okay, well, if I could just fix this little problem for my kid, this will happen and it'll all work out.
right.
And it's actually been such a relief and so liberating to kind of say, you know, my daughter's in Madrid right now. There's things that I'm like, okay, wait, maybe you should think about this, or are you sure you're doing this? And she is just managing and she is navigating it all. And I get to sit back, right? You sort of change roles as your kids get older. I'm not in the driver's seat.
Right.
And I and I think there was a time where I mourn that loss.
Mhm.
But now I don't want to be, because I know that it gives me time for myself and time that I can do things. And with my parents, with my husband, I have really good relationships. I've given a lot, and I sort of say, this is the time. This is the time for me. I am going to focus on what I want to do and how I want to do it, and that might take away a little bit of time from you, but I still love you and
I
I
love
still want to be with you. It's all good. But I'm going to sort of take this time because I have it. That's the other thing. You have to sort of carve it out and say, this is mine. I'm going to do this. And I think it makes such a big difference, and you
it.
get to show up in a different way for the people that you love once you do that.
Absolutely. I was just gonna say this. This is helping you to show up differently for them, better for them, right? That's the really important part of this. Absolutely. Sonia, we're racing towards the end of this year, which is crazy to think about. And you've already accomplished so much. But tell us a little bit more about what's next. What's the next chapter for the Marigold Center? How are you continuing to kind of move the important work that you're doing as we look to the horizon of even next year?
I think that for the Marigold Center, I want to make sure that it continues to be a community building space.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that there are women who come through, that we have these weekend gatherings, that we have nightly gatherings, that there's just the space for women to continue to gather,
Mhm.
and talk and share. So I think that's a really important piece that I want to make sure that I don't forget, because you get so wrapped up in patient care and your day-to-day things that
Right.
sort of that piece could get lost. So I want to make sure I keep that in the forefront of my mind.
Mhm.
I also believe that this narrative of perimenopause and menopause is just getting stronger,
Mm.
out there. There's a lot of books, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of Instagram posts about it. And so for those perimenopausal patients, and perimenopause can start as early as 35, I want women to recognize those
Right.
symptoms and sort of get ahead of it, right? Because if you know menopause is coming, and like you said, it's going to happen to all women, we can prepare for it. There's
Right.
things that we can do so we can sort of sail into it. I tell my patients, I do not want you to raw dog it into menopause. We don't
Right.
need to do that.
Right.
And so my work is really, I want to be able to educate. I want to be able to prepare women,
Mhm.
um, for the symptoms that may occur, and for them not to ignore it. So that way they can have a powerful midlife.
Well, speaking of the work, thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for the work that you're doing to help us, from a society, really think and differently about the way we talk about the way that we view sort of the care of women in their midlife and beyond their midlife. Dr. Sonia Singla of the Marigold Center, so exciting to talk to you today. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And we're going to be watching everything that you're doing, and very excited to see you continue with this important work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Take care.